everybody. Welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. My name is Sam. It's great to see all of you again. It's even better to see my good buddy, great friend, brilliant clinician, James Anir. How are you today?
Very well, Sam. You look like you're somewhere other than your norm today.
I'm in a hotel room, and there's probably a fuse on how long they're going to let me stay with the late checkout that I requested. My son has a big baseball game today, so I wasn't going to miss our time together, and I'm ecstatic to be with you. In the interest of not getting thrown out of my hotel room too early, we're going to jump right in. But before we jump right in, I'm going to throw out a disclaimer to the betrayed. We have so many of you betrayed partners and spouses, male and female, that watch these podcasts and email us, leave comments, reach out on different mediums. And we just want to say we knew that this would happen and we want this to happen because we want to support and help the unfaithful as well as the betrayed. We know you betrayeds have so many questions about why does the unfaithful do this? So today I'm going to pose a very compelling but revealing question for both James and I to answer that is going to care for both partners. But I'm going to ask it in such a way that you betrayeds might say, why wouldn't the unfaithful need or want to be this particular way? The question is, why is perfectionism so dangerous in the life of the unfaithful? You could say it this way: why is the pursuit for perfectionism so dangerous in the life of the unfaithful? But the disclaimer, and I'm going to punt to you in a minute, James, because I want you to speak to the disclaimer. The disclaimer is, man, it would be great to have a perfect recovery, to never mess up, never think a bad thought, never ever have even a high risk yellow choice or action. But the idea that perfectionism is attainable is just not realistic, right, James?
Well, we're all human, and I think in a much broader sense, perfection is unattainable. Not just in recovery. In recovery, obviously, we have a program where we make correct course corrections as quickly as we can, even within seconds. We're learning that as we go. The perfect is honestly an illusion. We can't be perfect in anything that we do. If you think about it, I mean, you're a baseball guy. What's a good average? Like,
Man, if you're hitting 300, you're making millions of dollars, and that's failing 7 out of 10 times.
right, exactly, right. We tend to look at things at, the Dan Marinos of the world, and how perfect was Dan Marino? He was really, really good, right? Even Montana. I mean, any of those. Sorry, I'm dating myself.
You're bringing up some pretty phenomenal quarterbacks, let me tell you. We're going to strike some division within the
No,
ranks, but
none of them were
you're
perfect,
right.
right? I mean, it's not
Right.
possible. And these are people who are at the top of their profession, right? So impossible to be perfect and in anything. Yet why are there so many perfectionists out there? Because there's a big reason. So
So,
get to that.
right. So I talked with you one day and you explained how we hate things being undone,
Mhm.
and that sometimes that can tap into of abandonment because we avoided maybe we avoided unmet feelings, we avoided trauma, we avoided feelings of unworthiness, we avoided feelings of shame by trying to be, case in point, the perfect athlete, the perfect pitcher. Or maybe somebody tried to be perfect in school where they were like, got to have a 4.0, or now in weighted grading scales, I got to have a 5 or a 6.0, how it's weighted in some places. But we are trying to avoid criticism. We're trying to avoid feelings of unworthiness. How does it all become the tornado that we just feel massive feelings of even self-hatred and wanting to shut down?
So essentially, there's some sort of wound early on, right? A lot of times that's going to surround abandonment, rejection, those sorts of things where we feel like, okay, if I'm perfect, if I'm the perfect student, if I'm the perfect athlete, if I'm perfectly polite, right? If I'm the star child, right? And that doesn't mean always the best out of all the children, but it can mean it can really mean socially just very, very acceptable. So that's
Right.
part of my upbringing. Um, so if we are not, then we are exposed to criticism.
Hmm.
You know, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you do this? I told you you have to do this. What's going on here? Straight A's, but what's this with the B or the C, right? And you know, so we grow up feeling like we have to be perfect. Not to mention that society puts that on us as well, right? What's the
Yes.
goal all the time in everything? 100%, right? And so when we fall short of that, it creates failure, right? So what is failure? Failure is a D, maybe an F, but really, when we don't reach the 100%, we start thinking of that as failure, or a great many of us do. There are some people who can accept less and they're okay with it. And I wish I were one of those.
And
But that's not failure.
it's at this point, sorry I talked over you, but I can hear the keyboards starting to go. It's at this point that the betrayed might think, so are you saying that we shouldn't expect them to have a pursuit of perfection? No, no, no. Hell no. We want them. Those of you that come from faith would remember the words of Jesus, be ye perfect. And so our intent should be the best possible recovery. Even if we don't come from faith, the intent should be, I want the best possible recovery. I want to be as close to perfect as possible. But we're not saying that this is an excuse to have a shoddy recovery. And we're certainly not saying to you, unfaithful, you don't have to be perfect. You're just doing the best that you can. So you minimize an excuse.
Right.
You should probably clarify that from your side, right? Because that'll minimize any angry email that we might get.
So I wasn't referring to recovery in that part of it. I was talking to really speaking to childhood and
Right.
how we get to this place of perfectionism in the first place. So absolutely not. When we're in recovery, you want the highest bar as your goal. That does not mean, however, that if you run into bumps along the way, which who will not, that you don't, go into shame and such.
Right.
So the deal would be really is okay, rather than shame, which can drag you down deeper into the negative end and perhaps even as far as relapse, which would
Yes.
basically make it harder for you to get back on that horse and work your program and keep doing it. The idea would be to have a much more positive view of that. Okay, what was I missing there? What did I miss that caused me to trip up
Exactly.
and that I didn't act in the way that I wanted to act or whatever, or that caused me to have to work my program so hard. So, okay, that's so much more positive because that's saying, okay, let me identify where that happens so that I don't do that again. Right.
That's
So
exactly right. That's exactly right. I think it's beautifully said. You talking about saying, okay, you had a misstep or a high risk behavior or choice. Let's find out why. That doesn't mean, oh, you're being a perfectionist. Give yourself grace. You don't have to figure out why you did what you did. You still have to understand what led up to those choices, right?
absolutely, if I'm slamming my head against a wall because I made an error that is workable and fixable, right? And I'm not going to be able to think about because I'm banging my head against the wall. I'm not going to be able to think about what it was that happened and how I can fix that. I'm going to be instead going deeper and deeper into shame and into victim mode. And if I'm in victim mode, then all I'm going to want to do is to run away and cover that, self-soothe with typically what I used to act out with.
James, did you just turn this into Sam's personal session? Because I think you just described so much of my life. When you were walking me through this, you and I talked about, I felt, well, just use me. I felt like a failure when I couldn't perform at a level that I knew and I wanted to perform at. I had that approach in my former life. I had that approach in professional baseball. And I don't mind telling people I have that approach to my videos, trying to be the best that I could. But sometimes, and thanks to some pretty choice words and emails over the last decade, I come up short. It's going to happen. I want to be perfect, but I come up short. But perfectionism becomes addictive because what happens is we're going to fail. And then when we fail, here's the danger part for me. And I think this will resonate with many unfaithful. When we fail, we want to escape, we want to avoid, we want to run. That has to be pretty common with you doing, it's common in my coaching practice. It has to be super common in your intensives and you helping men and women deal with this. I have to believe that.
The failure is one of the biggest causes of relapse, not the biggest, but one of them, and it's way up there. And so, the taking it back to perfectionism, if we can't be perfect, what are we? Failures. And if we
Yes.
fail because our bar is too freaking high, and I'm not talking about recovery here, but I am talking about everything that took place in childhood up until this place. If that bar is so high, I need everybody around me to be happy with me,
Yes.
right? Or I've got to make sure that's done absolutely perfectly and gets in on time, and I get straight A's or whatever this happens to be. We are going to fail, and then the feeling of failure is what I'm talking about from the childhood wounds. Typically, what we get is a feeling like we're not loved anymore, even if that's not what our parents intended, right? But we've disappointed them somehow because they're like, well, I love these A's, but what about this C, right? So, okay. I know I gave that example before, but it's a good one, right? Because what do?
Yeah.
We end up focusing on the C, not on any of those A's. My
And
master, my master's, I had a 3.94. 3.94 in a master's is not a bad grade. Now, this is without the weighted stuff you were talking about. So 4.0
right.
was the highest. I was so mad at that professor who gave me an A minus because it was A level work. Just I was in a group and the other people in the group didn't do their work. So I was
Yeah.
really, really mad. I know it sounds like I'm still bitter, maybe a little.
Maybe. Well, this will be a James session later, but
But that's
you
my point is 3.94, and I was upset about that versus holy crap, that's a really great grade coming out of a master's.
absolutely. Okay. Where did that come from?
That came from my youth of needing to be, or growing up, having to be perfect so that A, I would be noticed, B, I wouldn't be in trouble, C, everybody would be happy with me, and D, then also praise because of those straight A's. But that's what the standard it took to get the praise, right? So
Because that's exactly, it was the same way with me. I had to be perfect on the baseball field. I don't mind telling you my grades were trash. I mean, C's get degrees. Let's be honest. Over here on this side, the athlete, we're just happy that we're in school. And for me, I won't tell you my master's grades. I'll just tell you C's get degrees. We'll just leave it at that. But on the baseball field, my life revolved around that. In my youth, I felt like I gained praise and attention and acceptance and validation and meaning by throwing a little white baseball really, really hard. That was my goal, to be perfect, because if I wasn't perfect, I didn't feel like I got the praise and the acceptance and the validation and the meaning. And so in that goal for perfection, aren't what are we really trying when we're adults and we're trying to be perfect at everything that we do, our job, our career, our investments, our marriage, our family, child rearing? When we're trying to be perfect, what are we really trying to do?
we're trying to avoid being rejected and abandoned again. We're trying to
Oh,
avoid having those wounds hit, right? Our perfectionism is how we shield against any of those arrows getting in, right? But if we're imperfect, our shields have gaps, they drop down, arrows get in and hit those wounds of abandonment and rejection. Those go together a lot, right? So
So if the
that's
arrows get in, the arrows get in, what happens to us? Because you just said that so well. If I was listening, I would be on the edge of my seat. The arrows get in, and what happens to us?
then we're going to react. So we go into into an immediate reaction, which is defensive. If we're with somebody, that might come out as an offensive, right, type of defense. If we're not, we'll probably try to isolate, if we can't get out of the situation we're in, run away in our head, right? But eventually, also ultimately, it's about the getting away from it.
Hmm.
So, which also means it's not just getting away from the problem, but now we're isolated. We're on our own. We're alone, right? We don't have people supporting us because they might be mad at us, or we might have pushed them away so hard, right? And we don't really want to, in that particular mood and state we're in. We don't want to connect, even though that is ultimately the solution to it. And then we isolate, and isolate means that we are alone. We're not, that's cutting people off. That's the disconnection, right? That's finding that safety there. And it isn't really safe because if I'm left to my own thoughts, I'm gonna spiral into deeper and deeper shame. So, solitude is another solution. Now, here's the difference. What's isolation versus solitude? Solitude has an element of growing as a human being. Meaning,
Right.
okay, I'm deliberately going to take some time here for myself and do something that's going to be self-loving acts, things that are going to grow me, whether that's reading or resting, but something that's going to grow me as a human being. Isolation does not, it diminishes us.
So let me ask you this though. I just wrote down. I'm always taking notes during our podcast because I can go back, but I always learn from you. And before we get to the solution, there's another step. And I thought that this was only me, but then I found out through talking to you and talking to other clinicians and just other clients of mine that people who are perfectionists can also struggle with procrastination. It's a bit counterintuitive
Right?
because we procrastinate because we're afraid that we can't be perfect. And then we feel shame that we're not perfect. And we feel like failures. At least I feel like a failure. And then we failed again. And then we want to, and this is what's sad. And so, unfaithful and betrayed, hear this. We feel like failures. It's sad. We have more feelings, and then we want to act out. We want to escape. We want to soothe. But sometimes we even act out before we fail because we're so afraid. We almost self-sabotage.
Oh,
So how do we deal with why is procrastination? Explain the connection between being a perfectionist but still being someone who struggles with massive procrastination.
so you really actually already did that, but I'm going to clarify a little more. Um, so
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Let me just say, no, I'm just kidding. You make it make sense. Like I always say, make it make sense.
So perfection, if we're pursuing perfection, we also know how exhausting that is to even try it, right? And then we also know how seldom we reach it, right? And then that creates fear. So that makes us have to gather so much energy to try to do something because we know we're going to be going after it for perfection, which if you think
Yes.
about a hyperbolic curve, so, you know, I'm probably doing this wrong on the screen, but essentially here's your XY axis, right? And so this part is, okay, wow, that's good, right? To here is good. Then this, which gets closer and closer to the goal here, but never quite reaches it, is the law of diminishing returns. That's perfectionism. It takes us time and time and time, and we never quite reach it, and we're punishing ourselves and we're getting exhausted, etc. If we could stop here, where, to quote Tom Clancy, good is good enough, while perfect is a pain in the beep, right? Okay, so that's where we need to. But unfortunately, perfectionists are always in here, trying to go way beyond, and yet it's so much energy and effort. So if this down here is energy and time, here it is. Wow, we're expending
Mm,
it, expending it, and expending it. But here's the success, is really stopping right about here. And so we're going to fail. Nobody can
mm,
reach that mark, and we're going to be exhausted by the end of it. So then we get into the I'm tired, I'm angry with myself for not
yeah.
getting this. I'm failing, and guess what? That all of those add up to a need to self-soothe. And if we do not have really good recovery where our self-soothing is about something positive and growth oriented, I'm going to do breath work, I'm going to do body work, right? So by that I mean somatic interventions,
Right.
tapping and that sort of thing. I'm going to do journaling, I'm going to call somebody, all of these really positive things that can help our lives. Then guess what? We're going to run. So I don't want it to be heard as, oh wow, okay, yeah, that imperfection is just fine.
Yep.
We do have to be able to say, okay, I did that imperfectly. How am I going to improve? And who can help me do that? Um,
Yes, because the man or woman that says, see what James and Sam said, see how they said good is good enough. You shouldn't be angry at me for my porn or my flirting or my wandering eyes. We try not to cuss on here. We're just going to say that's a bunch of bull. We are not saying that. That's you saying that, looking for any opportunity to justify your lack of integrity and living outside your values and getting away with what you want to get away with. You'd probably say that a little bit nicer, but I think it's crap, right?
it is crap. We can't allow any of that into our lives. That is called permissiveness, right?
Ooh,
So we cannot be permissive. So we are going to, our primary goal here is recovery. Our relational recovery is right in there. They work together,
yeah.
right? So recovery has to be our primary goal. Without recovery, we have nothing.
Okay. You started to offer some of the solution, and I interrupted with procrastination. Getting back to the solution, you said solitude is a great solution, but not isolation. So walk us through the difference between isolation and solitude.
Okay, so isolation is a very negative space. I'm just cutting off everybody around me. I'm trying to part of it is trying to reduce all of the input we have, right? All of the chaos, even though we caused the chaos usually, and we invite it in. So it's an attempt to do that. It's just not a healthy attempt to do that, because we're cutting ourselves off rather than healthily looking at everything that's going on and saying, okay, how can I get this to a place where it's manageable, right? Versus, let me just cut it all off and run,
Yeah.
and then be isolated, because isolation, that alone, so alone, is a huge impetus or towards relapse to behavior. Um, so healthy response is solitude, because in solitude we're going to be reflective. We're going
Mm.
to allow thoughts to come to us about how positive, how to grow, how to do things better the next time, how to not, and I'm not talking about, okay, how am I going to be perfect? How am I going to be perfect? That's
Yes.
that's going to wind us up again. That's actually
Right.
negative. Usually in isolation, that's where we end up, is in rumination or circular thinking. When we think
Absolutely.
circularly, it's exactly that. We're going around and around and around. Eventually that turns into a spiral downward. So with solitude, we're able to take that circle and essentially break it and then lay it out linearly, right? And then
I
we're
think
able
it's
to to really do something with it.
I think it's beautiful. I see solitude as self-soothing or self-regulating, if you will,
Yeah.
because I've had a hellacious week. Last night, I drove down to where my son plays college baseball. There happens to be a beach here in Texas. You on the West Coast, it's not like you guys, trust me. But I sat on the beach, I think, for a good hour. I called one of my best friends, talked with them for almost an hour, prayed a little bit, felt, just kind of let myself soothe. Then I went back to my hotel room and I read through my notes that I had from a session recently. And then I went through some songs I have on my Spotify playlist. It was a beautiful night to reset, to self-soothe. I never had any desire to act out or do anything stupid, but I needed that alone time. I needed solitude. So would you agree that solitude, and the perfectionist wants to grab at this like a pit bull, it's not working your ass off per se, but it's solitude that has a purpose that is maybe kind of free flowing. I don't have to hit a checklist, but I'm not just isolating, I'm self-soothing appropriately within the bounds of our integrity and our character,
Yes.
right?
There is nothing wrong with self-soothing. It's what we do to self-soothe
You
that
were worried. I
is
saw your face. You were worried where I was going. You were like, oh, Sam, don't say anything stupid again. So rescue me. Yes, self-soothing is good if we do it.
in a positive, growthful kind of way, right? So that we're getting more in touch with our souls, who we are, growing as a human being, becoming more relational, all of those things. Remember that solitude, yes, it is alone, but it is connecting with ourselves, right?
Mm, that's a
Which
great point.
which then if we're learning how to connect with ourselves, our the quality of our connections with others, including our partners, is going to be so much better.
Amen, brother. That's exactly right. I say that again for the people in the back, as they say.
So the more we work on connection with ourselves, the better our connection with everybody else in our life is going to be.
Because
And
we're self-aware,
yeah,
right?
right, exactly. Self-awareness and all of the other things we've talked about in the past, self-compassion, self-loving acts, all of those things where we can start seeing ourselves as actual human beings and not these machines that have to be perfect. Then okay, I'm a human being. I'm worthy of this solitude and this work that I'm doing, right? And that makes the work so much easier because we're going to resist it less. It doesn't feel as much like punishment.
And we can get out of the recreation of childhood traumatic patterns that we don't deserve this solitude. We don't deserve to be, we should work. We don't deserve to be joyful or self-compassionate, right? That's a black hole.
Exactly. That defining or discerning between what is healthy for us and permissiveness is really, really important. And we need guides for that, right? So sponsors, mentors, therapists, coaches, we need some guides to be able to show us where we're not, where, oh boy, that's permissive. No, we don't go there.
Yes.
Right. And a lot of that is defined with the three circles that we talked about previously, and the nose and then the top lines. Everything that is in the go zone, the green outer circle, that is positive. We should be practicing those every day. Some of those are going to be with other people, some of them are going to be in solitude. All of those in the green circle are going to be things that advance us. So if we're in the green circle, we're not going to be in the orange and the red circle. Um, and
It
if people
makes
are
great
not
sense.
sure what that is, go ahead back and listen to some of the other podcasts. Um, yeah.
So let me ask you our final question. How can we determine if, and maybe this is a better question to help the betrayed, how do they know if their partner or spouse is just being lazy, or they are really struggling with this perfectionism and this procrastination wormhole. What are some final thoughts that might help them make sense of it?
Lazy will not look like exhaustion. It will not look like they're pedaling on a hamster wheel so fast that that they're scared to get off, and they will see a desperation, and that's a desperation in and of itself is a problem. It
Yeah.
needs to be more of I want this really badly, right?
Mm.
And whereas desperation can signify the perfectionism. Now, I do want to say that um, one of the reasons that we chose this topic today was because the seeking perfection in other things, so in life, in can I be the perfect parent, the perfect son, the perfect student, the perfect boss, the perfect employee, perfection, all of those things, if unattainable, mean we're going to fail. And for people who have addictive qualities, then unfortunately that failure is going to drive them towards that. So it's the everyday things that we're trying to be perfect in that can drive us into in the wrong direction.
It's beautifully said. It resonates so much with me. I think this was a session just for me that maybe other people will benefit from. So thank you for peeling back the veneer into my life. But for those of you that are watching and listening, we're honored that you have spent this time with us. If we can help, please reach out to us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. You can leave a comment here. We'd love for you to like this episode and to follow us on our YouTube channel. You can also find us on the web at asktheunfaithful.com. If they want to inquire about your intensives, James, if they want to talk about how they can maybe even have a free evaluation if an intensive is right for them, how can they do that?
So they would email our office manager, Gail, at info at hopeforus, HOPEFORUS.com.
Awesome. You can
Or
also They can also go to your website, which we direct people to all the time too, right? Remind them, maybe for the new people, what's that website?
so that is hopeforus.com, HOPEFORUS.com. It's also corerelationshiprecovery.com, just in case that's easier. It's just long.
Awesome. Awesome. We're so glad that you joined us. If we can help, reach out. Don't do this alone. Develop a care team. A care team is vital for your own success and relapse prevention and for your partners as well. Have a great day. Thank you for being with us again.
Thank you.